There was an elderly couple who had been married for about 60 years, and an individual came along one time that was young and asked the older gentleman, he says, "How do you attribute the success to this marriage that you have? You know, I know all marriages have disagreements. There's always fights, and you know, at some point you get angry with your spouse." And he says, "Oh yes, we knew all that was coming before we married." He said, "We made an arrangement with one another." He said, "The arrangement was this: when she gets angry, she immediately gets to take all of her anger out toward me, say whatever she wants to, and get it completely out of her system." He says, "But for me, when I get angry," he says, "I go outside and I take a walk." And he says, "That has contributed much to my outdoor lifestyle." Believe it or not, that joke begins this lesson. It does, it does. It is very easy for individuals to get in relationships, regardless of where those relationships are, and there be disagreements, there be struggles, there be hard times, and all of a sudden, what is built up deep within the individuals is what we refer to as resentment. Okay, resentment. And the quality of love found in 1 Corinthians 13 that we're going to be talking about today talks about this concept of resentment. Okay, and so we're going to be talking about it. Paul makes this statement: "Love or charity thinketh no evil." Thinketh no evil. Now, we have not as yet entered into the lesson. So just quit looking at your notes and somebody tell me, what do you think it means when it says, "Love thinketh no evil"? What does that mean? Okay, because we got to know what it means to practice it, right? So love thinketh no evil. Doesn't plot evil, okay? Doesn't plot evil. Anybody else? Larry?
I remember a member of the church years ago who saw an elder at a baseball game, and he was on the other side of the stand, and he had a Coke in an aluminum can. She said, "I saw an elder drinking a beer."
Oh.
"How did you know it was a beer?" "Well, it was in an aluminum can." She was thinking evil.
Ah, okay. Thinking evil. All right, so she thought evil of that individual, didn't she? Okay? Plot evil, Jeannie says. Anybody else want to give this thing a shot, Jim?
Evil of an interaction between brethren.
Say it again.
Evil was an interaction, thinking a person meant something that they didn't mean.
Oh, so attributing wrong motives.
Interaction between people and thinking evil of what they intended.
Okay? We're going to get down to the definition of this term, okay? Seeking revenge. That would be thinking evil, wouldn't it? Okay? Let's get down into this thing, okay? And let's really study what it means. We're going to do our normal three things. We're going to define the terms. Secondly, we're going to look at some Bible illustrations. And thirdly, we're going to look at more of the application to our lives from this particular quality of charity. The definition of thinketh no evil. Notice what Strong says. He says that the word thinketh no evil means to take inventory. Folks, this word that we're talking about is an accounting term. Okay? Look how Thayer describes it. To reckon, to count, to compute, to calculate, to count over. He goes on to say that it means to make an account of, to consider, take into account, weigh. Robertson makes this statement in his word studies. To count up, to take an account, as of in a ledger or notebook. Vincent says, to reckon not the evil, taketh not account. Jeremiah in his commentary makes this statement. The Greek word translated by the phrase thinketh no evil is a word which means to take into account. It is a bookkeeping term which means to calculate or reckon as when you are figuring or entering into a ledger. Okay? Now, guys, when you start really thinking of the definition of this term, it's interesting, okay? Okay, it's an accounting term. Taking into account. Okay? Is it good to keep figures when you're in business? Is that a good thing to do? Yeah, if you want to stay in business, you do, right? You want your expenses, you want your revenues, you want your inventory, and you want it all calculated and put into a book, okay? And when you do that, okay, the Bible says that you're thinking, okay, thinking. Okay, you're keeping records, okay? Now here he says, don't do what? Thinketh no evil, all right? Does not take an inventory of what? Of evil. All right? Notice how it's translated in some of the translations. Thinketh no evil. American Standard Version, taketh not account of evil. King James Version, the New King James says, thinks no evil. Now it starts changing a little bit. New American Standard, does not take into account a wrong suffered. Wow. English Standard Version, is not resentful. NIV, keeps no record of wrongs. New Living Testament, it keeps no record, that should be the New Living Translation. It keeps no record of being wronged. Phillips, it does not keep an account of evil. And then the Message says, does not keep score on the sins of others. Yes, ma'am. Suspicion. Oh, okay. And that's kind of the first. There's really two sides to this particular coin, okay? Thinking no evil. And I've given you there in point G, under the definition, these two sides. The first involves how we perceive the motives of others. Okay? How we perceive the motives of others. Barnes makes this statement. We desire to think well of man whom we love. Nor will we think ill of his motives, opinions, or conduct until we are compelled to do so by the most unbreakable evidence. Okay, so thinks no evil. What he says it means is this. When someone does something, we do not immediately attribute an evil motive to what they've done. Okay? Love thinks no what? Thinks no evil. Folks, we're growing up in a society today that's teaching people to do exactly that. Okay? Any harm, any error, any misjudgment that is ever made by anybody, guess what? People get all upriled about it and immediately attribute some ill motive to what's been done in our society. Don't they? And they take it and run with it. Okay? God says what? Don't you do that. Do not attribute ill motives to others unless there's what? Evidence, unbreakable evidence for that. Okay? Now notice the flip side of this coin. The other application deals with past wrongs and hurts we have suffered from others. The one who loves does not keep wrongs in a ledger to continually use them against another person. Now folks, right here is where we really need to think about the application of this in the church and in our homes. Okay? Because it's very easy to keep a ledger of all the wrongs that somebody has committed against us. Okay? We're going to come back to that when we really get to talking about the application of this stuff. Okay? Very, very interesting. So you have two different definitions of this, or two different applications of this to our life. Thinks no evil, does not immediately attach an ill motive to what somebody does. Okay, that's one. Secondly, does not keep a ledger of all the wrongs that somebody has committed against us. Okay, now let's look at some Bible examples of this. Okay, the first example involves Jonathan with regard to his father. Who was his father? Saul. Now, did Saul have trouble with David? A lot of trouble with David? Did he kind of hate David? You know, it was a little deeper than kinda, wasn't it? Okay? He threw a spear at him twice. You know? The Bible says, pin him to a wall. You know, make a wall hanging out of him. Okay? And when he couldn't do that, well then he went on a search for his life, did he not? Doing everything he could do to find old David and slay David. Okay, well, before David went on his wilderness flight, he knew that Saul had it out for him, okay? And so he wanted to talk to Jonathan about what's going on. And so we have this conversation in 1 Samuel chapter 21 and 2. Listen to what he said. And David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father, that he doth seek my life? Now, David tells Jonathan, Jonathan, your dad has it in for me. Your dad wants to kill me. And I want to know what in the world have I done to deserve this wrath that he has toward me. Listen to what Jonathan says. This is amazing. And he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it to me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? Now watch these words. It is not so. Jonathan was the what of Saul? The son of Saul. Did he love his dad? He loved his dad. And guess what he tells David? David, I will not attribute ill motives to my father until I know for sure. Okay? That's love, folks. Now, David knew this man had it out for him, didn't he? David had good evidence to know that he had it out for him, didn't he? Well, by the end of the chapter, if you just keep reading, guess what? Jonathan gets his evidence and lets David know, yes, you are right, and sends him on his way, doesn't he? But you see, right here at the first, Jonathan just can't believe it. I'm not going to attribute something this evil to my father. It is not so. And then he finds out what? Oh, yes, it is. But see, it's honorable of Jonathan that he didn't just immediately take that and say, oh, yeah, that's true, right? Folks, you better be careful when people come to you with stories about other people. You know that? Better be careful. You know it? We have a tendency, get a phone call, the person on the other end just starts talking, jabbering them little lips. And we just eat it up. Ooh, this is good. And then we get right on the phone, and guess what we do? We call the next person, pass it on. You better be careful. Absolutely. You better be careful about what you hear. Okay? That you don't attribute ill motives and ill will to another person. That isn't true. Okay? That's not love. It's not love at all. And so we need to be very, very careful of that. Notice point B. There are numerous examples of those who kept a record of the wrongs that other people did. And I've got 3 examples down here. The first was Joseph's brethren. What were the 2 or 3 things in Joseph's life that ticked his brethren off?
Coat of many colors.
Okay, there's the 2 biggies. The coat of many colors, right? And that showed that the father what? Favored him. And the second was the one Jim mentioned, his dreams, right? Okay? Now the brothers finally, they leave the house. And they go out in the fields and they're, messing around with the sheep and making certain that the sheep are cared for. And then there comes a time when his father says what? Yeah, go see how thy brethren do. I bet Joseph said, hot dog. They knew. They couldn't speak peaceably to him in the house. Okay? Now listen to what they say when he pulls up. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, are you ready? Behold, the dreamer cometh. See, we marked that one up in our little book. Mr. Dreamer. See, they had that down in their book, didn't they? Okay? This is what they go on to say. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some evil beast hath devoured him. Now watch this. And we shall see what shall become of his dreams. See, folks, those dreams got put in a ledger. Right up there in their mind, didn't it? They marked them up. And every time they saw Jonathan, every time they saw Joseph, guess what they thought? The dreamer. There's the little dreamer. There's the little dreamer. That's all they could talk about. His being a what? A dreamer. I bet if you talk to them a lot, and notice that they wanted to snatch his coat. Didn't they? We'll take the coat and put what on it? Blood. See, the coat, the dreams, man. You see, when people do us wrong, we have a tendency to what? Mark it up, right? Put it on file. Why do you put something on file? Yeah, so you can go back to it. You want to be able to find it easily, pull it out, and use it, right? That's why we have filing systems. And that's what they've done with old Joseph. Notice David the king. When David had to exit the city of Jerusalem, when his son was in rebellion against him, did he run into a couple of problems? Who was helping his son do this? Anybody remember? Joab, right? Joab was partly responsible for this. And then as he left, there was a man who met him on the way called Shimei. And Shimei made fun of him, threw curses at him, laughed at him as he was exiting the city of Jerusalem. But guess what happens? David gets to come back, doesn't he? Okay, the rebellion didn't take place. David gets to come back into the city. And Shimei is there. And he runs up to David just like a little humble little kid. Okay? And David makes a promise to him. Listen to this. This is found in 2 Samuel 19:23. Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware to him. Okay? You made fun of me, you laughed at me, you cursed at me while I was leaving Jerusalem. Now he's come back, and guess what he tells him? Thou shalt not what? Die. Now guys, in the early portion of 1 Kings, David is about to die. Who's going to assume the throne? Solomon is. Okay? And so David tells Solomon to do some things. And guess what he tells him to do? You make certain that Joab and you make certain Shimei do not live. What's going to happen if you don't live? You die. What was it that David told Shimei? Thou shalt not die. And now here David is at the end of his life plotting the death of who? Shimei. You see, David made a what? He made a ledger in his mind, didn't he? Wrote it down in a book. I don't know a literal book, but he wrote it down. He kept record of it. This man did me wrong. Now I've come to the end of my life. I haven't killed him, so guess what, Solomon? You get rid of him. Unbelievable. Did the elder brother keep a record of his younger brother's sins and transgressions? He did, didn't he? Here's what the Bible says. This is found in Luke chapter 15, verse 30. But as soon as thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots. See, reminded his daddy of all the bad things that his son had done, right? He took your inheritance. He went and used that inheritance the wrong way. And guess what? He did it with harlots. Remember that, Dad? I remember it like it was yesterday. Isn't that true? That's the way that young man felt about it. You see, he kept a ledger of the wrongs of his brother. Marked them up. And when the brother comes, I don't know, wouldn't you like to know how long the brother had been gone? What if the brother had been gone 10 years? And that's happened before in families, haven't it? I knew a friend of mine, he left his home at 18. He said he was gone for 13 years before he came back home. And he showed up at his brother's wedding. Okay? 13 years. Hadn't seen his brother, hadn't seen his dad, hadn't seen anybody in his family. 13 years. And all of a sudden he just shows up. And he shows up, the old brother said, oh, there he is. See, he kept a what? He kept a record of the wrongs of his brother. Didn't matter why his brother came back. He kept the wrong. Now, look at the application, because this is where we really have to look at this stuff. Love does not put evil motives upon the actions of others unnecessarily. Clark says, believes no evil where no evil exists. Okay? Folks, if there's no evil that's been conducted, then guess what you and I cannot do? We cannot put an evil motive on it. Okay? And yet, don't we do that sometime? We have a tendency to do it a lot of times, don't we? And the question that I ask in the notes is this: why in the world do we put evil motives on the actions and intents of others? And there's probably numerous reasons. One is we've been hurt in the past. And folks, if you ever get burned in the past, guess what you don't do in the future? You don't trust, do you? And when you don't trust, it's very easy to assign an evil motive to another person, isn't it? A second thing I thought of is this. In the same situation, in the same circumstance, I know how I would feel and I know how I would act, so I project how I would feel and act on another. Right? If I'd been in that situation, this is how I would have done it, and this would have been why I did it. And so now I project how I would think and how I feel about something onto another individual and make that his motive when that may not have been his motive at all. You know what? What's another one?
There's a phrase, well, just on that point, there's a phrase that a teacher taught me a long time ago that says, suspicions of others are aroused only by knowledge of ourselves.
Oh, suspicions of others are aroused only by knowledge of ourselves. That sounds psychological. But it's true, isn't it? Okay? Suspicions of others are only aroused by what?
Knowledge of ourselves.
Knowledge of ourselves. And that's true. Okay? We know how we would do it. We know what we would think. We know how we would respond. And so we just put it on another person when that may have not been what they're doing at all. Okay?
Sometimes projection works slightly different in that we're in sin and we're miserable, and we want to project that case or that state onto somebody else because we're so miserable ourselves.
Sure.
And so it's like the old adage, crabs in a barrel. We want to pull somebody else down because we're feeling at the bottom.
Right.
And that's very pernicious and destructive, but we do it all the time.
We do, absolutely. So be very careful about your assigning evil motive. That's thinking what? Thinking evil. The Bible says, thinketh no evil. Okay? Way back there, Susan.
So in David's case, where Saul plagued him with evil intentions, was David justified in thinking that Saul had evil motives?
Yes, he had the evidence. See, he had a spear thrown at him 2 times. And so when this happened before he met with Jonathan, and so he meets with Jonathan knowing that he dodged a javelin twice,
We have somebody who has persisted.
Oh. If you have, what we said a while ago, indisputable evidence that you know what's behind this, then you're not making a wrong judgment. Okay? You're not attributing a motive that isn't there. It's really evil that's after you. You know what I mean? As long as you have evidence of what an individual is doing, you're fine. Okay? But so oftentimes nowadays, we go off and say things before we even have the evidence, don't we? And that's a dangerous position to hold, because what happens is we create a lot of stir and a lot of bad feelings, and then we come back at the end. We can't change anything we stirred up, and now none of it's true, but we can't heal the person's name of what's been done. Okay? Jeannie?
By what someone else tells us about somebody else, and we have no evidence that that's true. But we hold evil motives against somebody else because somebody told us about somebody else.
Oh yeah, that's that gossip chain, where it's almost impossible to get the evidence, and yet you still believe it, and maybe even start passing it on yourself. Absolutely. Jim?
In David's case, he didn't render evil Saul. When he had two opportunities to kill Saul, he did not.
That's right.
Because he wasn't going to lift the sword against the Lord.
Sure. And that's where we brought this example up before, didn't we? How he still behaved himself properly and seemly even against evil, didn't he? And so be very careful of motives. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. Love does not harbor resentment. Now watch this. Any of you in here ever been hurt by somebody pretty badly? Can you remember every minute detail? If need be, could you paint the picture well for another person? Now see there, every one of us are laughing. Yeah, I could do that. You want to meet me in the back, preacher, and I'll tell you about it. I don't want to hear about none of these stories. Okay? But you see, we all have them, don't we? Okay? Now my next question is this. Did the person ask for your forgiveness? Now in some cases it's been yes. In some cases it's been what? It's been no, hasn't it? But yet we still, even if they ask forgiveness, got every gory detail in our mind, don't we? And if need be, guess what I can do? I can paint the picture, man. You know it? Yes, sir.
You can forgive someone who has not repented, or you cannot forgive someone because they have not repented. Either one is okay.
No. I can't forgive someone who hasn't repented. It's an impossibility. God can't, and I can't do what God can't do. Okay, God will never forgive anybody who's never repented, so neither can I. Okay? Now, I can be a person who is desirous of their forgiveness, to give them forgiveness. I can be a person who longs for that, but I don't have to be a person, though, who, because I've been wronged, even though they haven't repented, I don't have to be a person who has to seek revenge on that individual or do that individual wrong because of it. And I don't have to, if I don't want to, put it in a ledger and keep a copy of it for myself for the rest of my life. You know what? Don't have to do that. I can, but I don't have to, do I? It's tough. We're going to get to a statement that somebody made, and I thought it was a pretty good one. Look at the chart that I've given you there. Somebody wrongs us, so what do? We record the wrong, right? Here's what he did. Write the whole little script. Okay, know every little detail. Well then, as we think about it more, what starts building within us? Anger, inner anger, and resentment toward that person. Okay, and it just builds, and it builds, and it builds. And then, there's even more rumination about it, right? And guys, the more we ruminate about something, the more we talk about something to others, the more we say it over and over and over and over. It used to be in psychology that they called that catharsis. Talk about it. Let your feelings out. It helps. No, it don't.
Because then the other person plants it.
That's a lie. What happens is this. When you start ruminating, you write it in pencil. You ruminate a little bit more, you write it in pen. You ruminate just a little bit more and you write it in Sharpie marker. You write it just a little bit more and guess what? It's become a stencil. And you write it just a little bit more and now guess what? It is engraved upon the table of your heart. Okay? There's a point that we'll make, and I'll just go ahead and make it now. Guys, did you know resentment can become a part of who you are? Did you know that? It becomes a part of who you are. I'm so angry over even just one thing. And that whole one thing becomes a little bit, or maybe even a big bit, of who you actually are. You ever seen people in divorce like that? You ever seen kids toward parents like that? See, this is the kind of stuff Paul's trying to talk about. Notice that rumination ultimately turns into bitterness, and it's warned against in Hebrews 12, verse 15. Okay? A root of bitterness that grabs a hold of your heart, and guess what roots do? They just keep going what? Deeper and deeper and deeper. And ultimately there's nothing but unhappiness, not in the life of the individual that you're angry with, but guess whose life? Your own life. Okay? There's blame, there's revenge, there's withdrawal from relationships. There's all kinds of things that we could talk about. Okay? All because of what? All because I had to write down the wrong and record it in a book. And I hold on to it forever. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. You got to be kidding. Note, this third section right here is the big part of it. I'll just run through it real quickly, okay? At the root of every wrong recorded is resentment. Resentment is the accumulation of unexpressed anger. Resentment seems to raise its head the ugliest in homes and within the church. Individuals seem to be armed with an endless list of ways other people have hurt, harmed, and wronged them. See, once you start developing a file, guess what? It never ends. Then you start noticing every little bad thing, every little, thing that you don't agree with, every little this and every little that. And all of a sudden when you're talking to somebody, it's not just the one thing, it's what? I got to run my laundry list against him because I hate him. I resent him. And that anger is burning within toward that person. Unbelievable. Love thinketh no evil. Notice the dangers of resentment. If held long enough, resentment becomes a part of who we are. Secondly, it destroys our peace of mind. Not to mention, peace with our partner is the price we pay for keeping resentment alive. A record of wrongs only drives the offender farther from your circle of love. Notice point 4. We hold on to resentment. Why? Because we seek some form of justice, right? I've been done wrong, and all wrongs must be what? Righted. And until it is righted, I'll hold on to it. It keeps us in the right? He's the bad, I'm the what? I'm the good. Let me tell you what he did. Right? Number 3, gives us one up on the other person. We like to be one up, don't we? We really do. We like to be one up. Maybe we don't know how to let it go. Maybe we get satisfaction as we think about the revenge that could be carried out. This is what he did, and if I really had the opportunity, this is what I'd do. And it makes us feel good as we think them going through the fire. I just watch him burn in that bed. That'd be fun. It gives us a form of control over others, doesn't it? You see, we're able to manipulate, aren't we? We're able to threaten. This is what you did. I'll let everybody know. You see, now I can manipulate you. You can just do whatever I want you to because I got you by the string, don't I? As long as there is resentment, we do not have to feel our responsibilities to the other person. Well, that's pretty good, isn't it? Here's that statement. Love forgives. Love does not just forgive and forget. Watch this. Love remembers and still forgets. Wow. I like that, you know it? There's a list of passages there, Paul's attitude toward those individuals who hurt him, and it's amazing how many are expressed, folks. Okay, there's right there, 7 different passages where Paul talks about people who've harmed him, hurt him, done him wrong, and guess what? His attitude toward them. Go home and study those. Paul had a good attitude toward people. Notice point A under the conclusion. Wrongs are part of life and no record can ever right them. Just because we keep a running tally of them doesn't mean that they're going to be what? That they're ever going to be corrected. We need to remember that, folks. 2 quotes. Love, instead of entering evil as a debt into an account book, voluntarily passes a sponge over what it endures. Surrender the compulsion to clear up every misunderstanding and let the ledger stay what? Unbalanced. See, I like those because it uses the ledger idea. Okay? John Chrysostom, he made this statement. It's a good one. A wrong done against love should be like a spark that falls into the sea and is quenched. It's pretty good, isn't it? Into the sea. Psh, gone. Love thinketh what? no evil. Good lesson right there, guys. It's hard to practice, isn't it? It's not evil. Come up to me and I'll tell you what you've done against me.
You're going to have a long life.